Welcome to Let's Talk Para, the podcast where we talk about all things para sport. I'm Yasmina Isa, a para badminton player, and I'm thrilled to bring you inspiring stories from athletes, coaches, researchers, and everyone shaping the para sport movement. If you're passionate about para sport or just hearing about it now, join me each episode as we delve into the world of para sport. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Para, where we talk about all things para sport. Joining me today, again as a co-host, is Jess Down. Jess is a sports psychology student at Loughborough University. And our guest for this episode is Adam Dickinson. Adam, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So Adam, could you tell me a bit about yourself?
So I'm currently a research associate in the Peter Harrison Centre for Disability Sport. My job title is Stakeholder Engagement and Knowledge Translation. So I'm kind of doing an evidence review of what the Peter Harrison Centre's done over the last 20 years. And then sort of working with partners to find out what the gaps are in research and what the future is for the Peter Harrison Centre in terms of research.
Yeah, so you've obviously recently just submitted your PhD.
Yep. So I submitted my PhD at the beginning of November.
Yeah.
So I started in January 2021, so just during COVID.
So 3 years?
So nearly 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah, nearly 4 years.
So what made you decide to get into para sport research or disability sport research?
My own personal journey is where it's got me to where I am now, sorry. So I was diagnosed with a chondrosarcoma, which is a type of primary bone cancer, when I was 20 years old in 2001. It's a long time ago now. And over 4 sort of major surgeries, I ended up having my leg amputated and becoming paraplegic because my chondrosarcoma was right on my sacrum where all your nerve endings are. So each surgery kind of severed more nerve endings. So gradually over 4 operations, I got a worsening disability. So going from a dropped foot to a numb leg to no leg and then fully paraplegic by the end. And I kind of disappeared for a long time because treatment sucks, and when you're changing your identity, it was pretty much every 2 years it was like come back, and I didn't know who I was anymore. So I think I disappeared for about 6 years, and then sort of getting back into the real world was through disability sport. It was a local community club that did air rifle shooting, archery, very solo sports. I got really involved in that, but I'd played football up until I was 18, so I really wanted to get back into a team sport. So I approached them about starting a wheelchair basketball club at the community centre, and we developed that. And I started that in 2013. I started working for that charity in 2014. And then that led me to going to university in 2016. So I think disability sport is what gave me my confidence and helped me to discover who I was as a disabled person.
Yeah. So what would you say was the thing that shifted your mindset to get more involved in disability sport?
My family made me do it originally. They kept going on and on about me going to the club. I'd moved out by myself and I was like lonely. I didn't have any communication with people really. So I sort of ended up doing what they told me to do for, I think, probably 4 years. My dad was telling me to go to this club. But it took me that sort of 4 years to build up the courage to do it and to realise I needed it. So, and then joining that community is what helped me to discover that it's not that bad being disabled. Because I think as someone who didn't have a disability until I was 20, I mean, really the worst disability started when I was 23, which was the numb leg. I couldn't walk properly. I had crutches. That really, I just didn't know who I was anymore, and I didn't like myself anymore. So being around that community helped me to learn to like myself and sort of reintegrate into society, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I know when I was 17, it was very much like you have to find yourself again. You have to find who you are, and everything that you knew about yourself has suddenly changed, and everything that you could do suddenly now you have to do differently. Mm-hmm. So finding similar people is a massive thing. Definitely. And finding people that you can lean on that understand what you're going through is huge.
I think it's that there's real dark humour as well in the disability community, and it helps you to kind of deal with it, is making jokes that you probably wouldn't make in public,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it helps you to understand it and to deal with it better.
Yeah, because I think when it's people who've gone through similar journeys, that's when it's, I think, a bit more. You have to joke about it,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
and that's- Yeah, so both of you, actually, it was an acquired disability. And so for you, it was at the age of 17, you said?
Yeah.
And so what was that shift like for you?
Yeah, just really scary, I think. And I was just in denial. I was like, this isn't happening. This isn't real. There's no way this is happening. I went from an active gymnast to then being told I might never walk again. I was like, this can't be real. It just doesn't seem real. Yeah, I think it's scary, and you do feel very alone. And there's so much that you have to figure out, like even a radar key and stuff like that. You have to figure all this stuff out as you go along, and you want to go to places you used to go, and suddenly it's not accessible. And it's just it's all just new and scary and really overwhelming.
I think definitely when you're going through cancer as well, like that's an added stress.
Yeah.
So it's not just acquiring a disability. You're worried. I mean, I nearly died when I had my leg amputated. I think they gave me about a 10% chance of pulling through because my body started to shut down. So that, knowing that you've nearly died as well and dealing with everything. So acquiring a disability is hard in itself, but
And
then
that
I
on
think
top.
cancer on top.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So after you've joined the club,
Yeah.
and that's obviously gave you the confidence, like you said. You saw people around you that were like you and similar to you. So you went to university quite late then, because...
Yeah, I was 35 when I went, yeah.
So what did you study, and what was that experience like as a mature student?
I did psychology. So I had tried to do psychology through Open University while I was in hospital, but it just wasn't happening. It was too much. So I went to Staffordshire University and did psychology. Lived in halls, which was...
How was that?
fun. As a 35-year-old living with 18-year-olds who just want to get smashed every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It was enjoyable. Like, it was nice. It's good. And I really enjoyed learning.
Did you know you wanted to get into parasport research at that point?
No.
So
No.
you just did it for the sake of doing...
I did it. I basically wanted to develop a career for myself in
Okay.
something that I was interested in.
Okay.
And I've always been interested in psychology. I did a bit of sports psychology during my A-level in PE, but like touched upon bits, and that really got me interested in it. But yeah, originally I'm more interested in pain, because I suffer from a lot of phantom limb pain and neuropathic pain, so I'm quite interested in pain research, and that's the route I wanted to go originally. I then, after my undergrad, I went down to Sussex to do cognitive neuroscience, specifically because they do a module in consciousness, which includes phantom limb pain. And then when I left there, my partner was doing her PhD up here at Loughborough University, so I moved in with her and started to look around the local area for stuff. And it just happened that British Wheelchair Basketball were then advertising the PhD with Loughborough in wheelchair basketball. And I was like, well, that's what got me back into society again. That helped me to gain the confidence to go to university.
Yeah.
And I want to help to drive research that works out how other people can get that opportunity. So just, I don't know, the stars aligned, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going into your research then, you've spent the better part of the last 4 years,
Yeah.
Researching it.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about the kind of research you've been doing over the past few years?
So I've been looking at pathways into wheelchair basketball, and looking at what leads to successful routes into the sport and what leads to missed opportunities. And I've been looking at the nature of the sport, like the inclusive environment. So in wheelchair basketball, they use reverse integration, which is putting someone without a disability into a wheelchair to participate in wheelchair sport. And that's how they view it to be. Sorry.
It's okay.
Where am I?
Reverse,
Right.
yeah.
So, wheelchair basketball, they use reverse integration, which is putting someone without a disability into a wheelchair to play wheelchair sport. And I think that's how they view it, as being an inclusive sport, because anybody can play. But actually, my research was looking around what else needs to be involved in that environment to make it inclusive.
Yeah.
And it's basically a white male-dominated sport, and that's in players and in the coaching workforce. So there needs to be more recruitment around gender, different ethnicities, different sexualities. It doesn't just have to focus on, it's a sport that anybody can play with or without a disability. There's so much more to making it inclusive, to make sure that everybody has a role model. Like speaking to some of the black players who are basically saying, I don't recognise myself in any of the coaches or the referees. How can I see a progression in the sport if I can't see someone in that role already? So it's like limiting their pathway.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you said wheelchair basketball is dominated by white males, but then you look at like the NBA, for example, it's dominated by black males.
Yeah.
So that's actually quite interesting. So, yeah. So you were looking at participation from the grassroots level.
Yes, I'm more interested in grassroots.
Okay, and what were how did you go about, the method? What was the method of research, essentially?
My methods were all qualitative, so everything was interviews. So I did some interviews using thematic analysis to look at common themes around the inclusive nature of the sport. And then I used a method called life history interviews, which is where you basically timeline someone's participation, and I did it in sport in general, leading up to wheelchair basketball. And then you talk around their journey in wheelchair basketball, and you kind of do a timeline in the first interview, and then you start picking that apart in subsequent interviews and looking at like the pivotal moments within their journey and what led to a successful pathway, or what were the good parts of their participation in sport, what were the negative parts.
Yeah, and what were the findings then?
It's quite interesting. Everybody seemed to find it by accident.
Wheelchair basketball.
Wheelchair basketball, yeah.
You hear that quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't through any promotion. It was through promotion, but it was like flyers that just happened to be lying around, or a poster that was on a wall. That's the only way they found it. It wasn't like anything that the NGB put out, the national governing body, or anything that their healthcare professionals told them. They weren't introduced to it at school. It just happened that they stumbled across it. So yeah, there needs to be a lot more around promotion of the sport, I think. Involvement in it. Everyone seems to enjoy it. I've spoken to one participant who doesn't have a disability in my life history, but a couple in my thematic studies, and they all talked around a limited pathway for players without disabilities, because you can't compete at an international level. So they can play in the national leagues, but that's as far as they can go. And if we're trying to use sort of able-bodied people to grow the sport, we need, I think, to provide a route for them to go into. I'm not saying they should be playing in the Paralympics, but Canada has a model where they have an able-bodied team that their Paralympic team competes against, sort of to prep them for the Paralympics, to give them that competitive nature of the sport. So it'd be good to have that.
In a way, would that be similar to like Bucks, so the university leagues in the UK, where you have any student can participate in wheelchair basketball, but I think there needs to be one.
So in Bucks, it's one disabled and one female on court at any given time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be something similar to that.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But giving them like a national competition that they can play in once every couple of years, where you get all the different NGBs put together a able-bodied team to compete against each other.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you are not classified. Were you classifiable? Or
I'm classifiable, yeah.
You were classifiable.
Yeah.
But you decided to keep it, like you played at the club level.
I play at club level, yeah.
Okay.
So I've always said I was not good enough at football to play like competitively. So why am I any better at wheelchair basketball? I'm really amateur at sport, but I love just playing sport.
Yeah.
I go in and I kind of muck in, but I don't say I'm skilled. I have no idea what I'm doing half the time in a game. I'm just like rolling around, just trying to catch the ball, but it seems to work. So yeah, I've never had any like wish to play at a higher level. I'm just happy to play, and I'm really lazy as well. That drive you need to be an elite athlete, going to the gym and training all the time. It's just not what I want to do.
You just want to play for fun.
I just want to play for fun, yeah. So
touching on that, I actually had this discussion with Alistair the other day. do you think there's a lot of opportunity available for disabled students who want to just be active but not play at an elite level?
In wheelchair basketball specific, or in
we could
at Loughborough, or
no, I think in general. Like
in general.
wheelchair-
So we're really lucky at Loughborough.
Yeah.
Like we've got a big
Yeah.
focus on parasport, and there's a lot of opportunities here. I don't think that's the same at every university, which is why Bucks use the rule that you can play for a university that's not your one, not your own. Sorry. So I think it's like 25% of your players can come from other universities. There are those that will use that to their advantage and like bring in the better players from around to make a good team, which I think is why they've sort of limited it now, because originally it wasn't limited to 25%. But I don't think the opportunities are there nationally at the moment in all universities. I think it's growing, but yeah.
Yeah, like, because I think now it's either you're elite and then the grassroots is still where there's a lot of
Yeah.
work to be done.
Like Staffordshire, so the only thing they did was UV wheelchair basketball. So if you haven't played wheelchair basketball before, getting in a wheelchair is hard enough as it is, let alone do it in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, but it seemed to be their novel aspect was to do everything UV.
Okay, yeah.
Down at Sussex, we had a similar to my lifestyle at Loughborough University, like the recreational sport. It was once a week. That was at Brighton campus, so Brighton and Sussex University students could come along and play with what was then Sussex Bears, the local wheelchair basketball team. So that's the sort of opportunities I've had at the two other universities other than Loughborough. One was not good, and I didn't play UV wheelchair basketball. I ended up joining a local team instead, and the other one was much better organised. And then Loughborough's, we got recreational, we got Bucks as well. So
yeah. So in terms of like your findings based off of that, what were the next steps based off of that?
So I think there needs to be a lot more promotion around wheelchair basketball, specifically for me. That's what I've looked at. Healthcare professionals don't seem to know that it exists. Education, we know, is hit and miss. I think it's like 1 in 4 disabled students participate in some form of physical activity at school. And that's a big topic at the moment with Paralympics GB and Activity Alliance and Equal Plays campaign and stuff. So there needs to be better promotion. I think the government needs to invest more in disability sport, because that will help it to grow, and that will help education and healthcare professionals to actually market it better and understand that it exists. But there needs to be more communication between NGBs, education, healthcare. We need to work with each other to drive that promotion of disability sport within schools and hospitals and get more people involved in general.
Yeah, and education's a big one, because it's kind of, they're young, it can be some people's first experience of sport, and if it's a negative one, for the rest of their life, then they're just going to have that mindset.
Yeah.
So it's really from the beginning making sure it's a positive experience for them.
One of my participants, she was either told, go to the library, do your physio, or she was forced to do things that she really couldn't physically do. Her disability just didn't allow it.
Yeah.
And she ended up in pain when she got home for like a week, because she had been forced to try and do a roly-poly, but she had a spinal injury. And it's like, but they didn't understand how to integrate her or include her in the PE sessions.
And sometimes it's as simple as having that conversation of, what would you like to do?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to get out of this PE lesson? But people just don't do it sometimes.
It's just not a big part of PE education either.
Yeah.
Like, there needs to be more focus on PE education, like inclusive sport. I know in America they have like, I think it's either a whole degree or modules that are based around adapted physical activity.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We do like maybe 1 or 2 sessions, and we need to do more.
I think the issue is the fear around it of, I've got a disabled student, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So the easiest thing to do is to not include them in the session, because in their minds that's the easiest thing to do, but then it would save them from doing anything.
Then I've been coaching wheelchair basketball since 2014-15, like level 1, so just getting people involved. And even now there's people that turn up and I'm like, I don't really know how to include you, but what you do is you talk to that person and you say, what can you do, what can't you do, what drills do you want to get involved in, if that's a conversation they want to have. So it's all around talking and communicating with people. But also, like, all 3 of us could go into PE education sessions at universities and just sort of highlight the benefits of it and like really draw home that message that it needs to be more inclusive and that there shouldn't be a fear around it, and you can just talk to people and work out what they can and can't do.
Yeah, and it's just getting that message out there and just making more people aware.
Yeah.
So Jess, you said you acquired your disability at 17.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do PE at that point?
So I did. So I was doing sport at A level, and a lot of it was practical, and some of my teachers were absolutely, like, the majority of them were incredible, and they would really try and they would talk to me, but still it felt like everyone would go and do something and I'd be in a classroom or I'd be doing a one-on-one with a teacher somewhere else, and that's fine. Like, I was still taking part. I think they struggled at the start to know what to do, but it was more for me the other students than the teachers. The teachers were great, and one teacher was like, right, we're going to do boccia now for our assessment so that Jess can take part and Jess can do it. And then you get the students like, I don't want to do that. Da, da, da. But my teachers were great with that.
You know, the thing with boccia, I think a lot of people it's actually quite competitive. Like,
It's really fun.
Yeah.
I love
really,
it.
It's really competitive.
No, like, people, because I think the assumption is if you're seated, therefore it's just going to be, you know, but it is very, like, I played it a few times and
No, it's good.
like full on.
Yeah.
But
It's one I take into, like, I do a bit of stuff with Cubs and scout groups and is it brownies and stuff.
Yeah.
Just doing little bits of parasport to take in stuff, and it's one that I do because it's an easy one to set up.
Yeah.
And they do look at it and they don't know what to do, but once they get into it,
Yeah.
they've really engaged in it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is good. I think I was lucky, though. I have to appreciate that I was quite lucky with my teachers, that they did build that relationship with me. They did work with me. I know so many people that, unfortunately, like, they didn't have that same experience. And, I mean, it's hit and miss. Like, there was a few days at the start I wasn't allowed in school because of health and safety and stuff like that, which is just ridiculous. But on the whole, I was really lucky.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back to your research, because I remember you, when I was getting a brief about your research before this, you mentioned something about you were looking at 3 pathways, like 3 interview pathways that you were. So you said there was one of someone who's acquired a disability, so it would be similar to you or Jess, or someone who was born with it, and then someone with no
without. Yeah.
So what were the differences between those 3?
Well, their engagement in PE at school.
Well,
so
that was
one big one.
Yeah.
And then I think the playing environment for the 2 players with disabilities were very different. Like, one was very negative. The other one was much more positive. It showed when you have professional coaches coming in, the benefits that you can get from that. Whereas the other one, they would have been a coach a long time, but their behaviour was really negative, and it led to them wanting to leave the sport. My participant without a disability, I think she really enjoys the environment as well. A lot of that is university led, and it's good training. At the university that she's at, it's good level of training, so she really enjoys that part of it. But I think the similarities are just how much people fall in love with the sport, and then it's just sad to see that some people can be put off playing by a coach. And, like, there's a lot of player welfare issues with that player as well.
Yeah.
So I think, very similar in they all love the sport. But different coaching environments were the things that really impacted the participation.
Yeah, I think you probably learn all about this, like the coach-athlete relationship. That's probably one of the key. I think that plays a very big role in.
Oh, it's massive. Yeah.
In whether or not you continue in a sport, or the comfort even, because I think it's different when you're non-disabled, because when you're disabled, there's that other barrier you have to overcome. So it's about feeling comfortable with your disability. So if that relationship isn't there, then it's a whole other.
You've got to trust your coach. You've got to rely on them, and like you said, if it's not there, the likelihood is you probably won't enjoy the sessions, and then you won't go.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I've had 4 very different sort of coaching. Well, actually 5, I suppose, because I did Bucks as well. Very different coaching experiences. and some of them made me not want to turn up to training, and others I would go out of my way to go to training and like cancel stuff to go to training. And it just shows the difference of that coach, that the environment that they create for you to turn up and actually enjoy playing, which I think is a big part of it.
Yeah. So this just came to me now when you were explaining about your research, but wheelchair basketball, right? It's often seen as the basketball para alternative, right? But the way you want to go about it is you want to, in a way, like this seen as a separate game that literally anyone could play, rather than being seen as an alternative. Would be
it's a lot of, if you look at the research, people sort of say the wheelchair is a piece of sports equipment. It's the same as you turning up with your badminton racket or someone turning up with a hockey stick. That's a piece of sports equipment, but you're actually just playing a sport. So it is a sport. Yes, it's a disability sport, but it's a sport that anybody can play. It should just be seen as sport, not disability sport. Yeah. That's, just for disabled people. It's for anybody, really.
Do you see progress in that front right now? Like, of anyone getting involved at club level?
Yeah. We've got players at every club I've been at that don't have a disability, and like the university, we've got loads of players turning up without disabilities that want to have a go. I deliver some sessions for the master's students that get them involved, and then they turn up to my lifestyle after that because they love just having a go at it.
So like the wider community?
The wider community, yeah. Like every team I play against has somebody without a disability in it, in the National League.
Yeah. And then internationally, that's still not...
You're not allowed, yeah.
Yeah. So
classification is sort of a 1-pointer to a 4.5 in disability, and if you don't have a disability, you're a 5-pointer. In the UK, it's different in other countries. So as a 5-pointer, you can't play internationally, but you can play in the national leagues.
Yeah. Do other countries have the implementation of incorporating non-disabled?
It's very different around the world. Some people really advocate for use of reverse integration to grow the sport, like in countries like Canada and New Zealand, because they're much more disparate societies. They're bigger countries, so they need to use people without disabilities to kind of grow the sport, to build teams. America's not as keen on it. I think Spain weren't as keen on it, but they're now trying to implement it more. And in the UK, we use it quite a lot now. Yeah. So yeah, it's very different internationally, which I think that's another part of my research, is like we need to come to some kind of consensus on how we implement different rules.
Do you think reverse integration should be used across different sports as a way to increase participation? Or...
I think it's really good at growing numbers, and then that helps to give opportunities to other people. Should it be the full focus on things? Not necessarily. I think there's a lot more work to be done around just getting people with disabilities involved in sports that they are able to do. There are sports that people without disabilities can do. They can play basketball, they can play football. I can't do that. Wheelchair basketball or sort of wheelchair rugby would be my sport. I've not played wheelchair rugby, but that would be my sport. So the opportunity should be there really for us, but I'm not against people without disabilities playing, but I am against it being the sort of the sole focus on trying to grow the sport.
Yeah.
And I get that it's bringing money into the sport. So every player will have to pay a membership, and that helps to increase money within the sport. But it shouldn't be the full focus on how to grow it.
It could be a method, but not not the only way to grow a sport.
It's brilliant in universities.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And like the amount of players that I met at Loughborough who had got to university with a disability and never played wheelchair basketball because they didn't know that they could.
Yeah.
Because they had ambulant disabilities, they weren't wheelchair users. And then, now they're playing a national league for different teams. So university is a really good setting for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you need players without disabilities at university because there's just not enough students at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But in the National League, we definitely have an abundance of players.
I think the biggest thing with reverse integration is the awareness it causes, at least on a university level, the awareness it causes. Like, Jess and I, we're on the Para and Disability Sport Exec, so we had numerous events, and whenever we'd introduce a sport that wasn't for disabled students, the disabled students would come try it out, and they'd actually not realize how fun it could actually
Yeah.
be for them. But then there's this awareness of, oh, this is like, they've become more exposed to it, whereas probably in school they've never been exposed to like seated volleyball, or like even for me new age curling. I just tried that like a few months ago.
Yeah.
That was my first time ever trying that. So it's stuff like that that you don't realize anyone could actually do. It's
Yeah.
not just for a specific impairment. I think that, like, I don't know what your take on it is when you see like students.
Yeah, well, they're always just like, oh, I didn't know about this, or it's my first time doing it. And obviously that's why we do these things. But it's like surprising how little sometimes they do know, and they don't know about it. And you just want to be able to tell them, like, there's so much you can do.
I think it used to be the sort of community clubs. So I was a part of a community club called Sports Able, and that was based in Maidenhead in Berkshire. And it was part of, they were called the SAD groups. I really don't like it, but it was sports for people with disabilities. I can't remember what it was actually. But there was like WAM SAD, which was Windsor and Maidenhead. There was SAD, which was Slough. There was Reading one. They were all over the Berkshire county, and every county had those kind of community clubs that offered all the different disability sports. So someone with a disability could go in and try different sports, and they're just not there anymore because the funding isn't there to keep those kind of things going.
Yeah.
And that's where people with disabilities kind of discover what they can do. So I think university is now kind of like replicating what you would have got in those communities.
Yeah, I think the grassroots is very important, because there's the few lucky ones that find their sport early on and take it to an elite level. But there's the people that want to do it for fun and starting off at the grassroots. And that's where, even though universities, we could consider it grassroots in a way, but like universities are starting, but I think everyone needs to follow suit in implementing those strategies.
Yeah.
So touching a bit then on like classification, how do you view classification within wheelchair basketball? Do you think it's inclusive in its nature, or?
I don't think it's fully inclusive. So I've spoken to a number of players that have unclassifiable disabilities. So they can't play a running sport. They just physically can't do it. So wheelchair sport is the sport they can do. But they are classified as a 4.5 in the National League, but they can't play internationally because they're not classifiable by IWBF. So that's really not inclusive, because it's a wheelchair sport for people with disabilities, and if they have a disability, they should be able to play.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more evidence-based classification, and that's sport-specific. I know we did some stuff at Loughborough around goalball and the use of the blindfolds to it was around classification using the blindfolds to make it inclusive or something. I'm trying to get it right. It's not my research.
Yeah.
But yeah, they advocate for more evidence-based research in every sport.
Yeah.
And I think we need to look at, is there an advantage for someone that's got, say, regional pain syndrome in a leg? Do they have an advantage over someone that's a below knee amputee? And we can look at, like, are they putting more force through the foot plate as they're shooting, which would give them that advantage, or not? And I think we can do that. We've got methods that can look at that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there's work to be done. The classification is very spinal cord led, because that's what it was based on. So the Paralympics was founded by, Dr. Gutman down at Stoke Mandeville, and that was all people with spinal cord injuries. That's the only people allowed to compete, like in the original kind of what they were disability sports games, whatever they were called.
Yeah.
But that was just people with spinal cord injury. And then as it's grown, there's more disabilities have been included in it, but the classification is still based sort of predominantly around that sort of spinal cord injury, sort of like, what level your injury's at and how that affects your limbs and the use of your limbs. So I think there's work that can be done.
So touching on that, then,
Yeah.
what's the role of, like, so I've had like a number of researchers researching in parasport.
Yeah.
So the Peter Harrison Centre.
Yeah.
What's the significance of having that, and what kind of impact do you see that the research coming out of it could have on the international stage?
So Peter Harrison Centre is like internationally recognised with, you know, an amazing professor in Vicky Tolfrey, who she's got her, you know, reputation internationally is, you know, next to sort of no one. You know, she's amazing. So the research we put out, you know, we do a lot around driving sports performance, and that's listened to by the NGBs. We do a lot around sort of health and well-being aspects. So we do a lot of guidelines that go out to healthcare professionals to show what they should be doing, and getting people with spinal cord injury, like, this is the kind of exercise you could be doing and the amount you should be doing every day. We are starting to look at classification a bit more. So we've got members of the research team that are doing PhDs in classification. But it's more around, I suppose, the social aspects of it and the implications of it, rather than sort of evidence-based classification. So I think Anna Martin was the first one in her research in goalball that really kind of looked at classification in itself, like how do we drive classification in goalball?
Yeah.
You know, what needs to be done to develop it. And I think we could start doing that in more sports. But then it's up to the IPC to listen to that research.
Yeah.
It's, you know, that at the end of the day, they have the autonomy to kick you out of the Paralympics if they don't think that you're using their guidelines.
Yeah.
Do you are there a lot of collaborations between the Peter Harrison Centre and the IPC?
So we do some stuff with the IPC. I think it's more NGB based, but that
Okay.
I might be very wrong.
Okay.
I don't know all the ins and outs.
Yeah.
But we do stuff with the IPC
Okay. Yeah.
around sort of classification. We've got Ian Gowans, who's an ex-Paralympian who's doing stuff around classification.
Yeah.
Vlada, who's just started at Loughborough Sport London, yeah.
Yeah.
So her stuff is more around the IPC and like the governmental aspects of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And to finish us off,
Yeah.
like my last question, I think, if you could go back in time,
Yeah.
what advice would you, and then we'll finish up with the activity, but what advice would you give to the 20-year-old self?
That it's going to be all right, and to get involved at a much earlier opportunity, because you've missed out on 6 years of your life. Really.
Right.
It's sad, but I spent it in my parents' house or my flat when I moved out by myself, because I just didn't have the confidence to go out. So yeah.
But now you have a really long title
And now I have a really long title.
Yeah.
that I cannot remember. So, but yeah. So we're gonna finish off with a little activity. So Jess and I have prepared a series of Would You Rathers.
Okay.
And she'll ask you one, and then I'll ask you one.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it from there. So I'll do the first one. Would you rather work on publishing a groundbreaking paper with no immediate recognition, or deliver a high-impact presentation at an international conference?
Wow. I would want to do the groundbreaking research.
And not have recognition.
Well, I don't know, actually. Recognition from who?
Okay, I haven't specified, but I don't know. Let's say like the top people in the IPC.
In the IPC, I suppose actually you want to do a presentation then.
The presentation.
Yeah, you want to show what you can do.
For the IPC.
Yeah, show them what needs to happen.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jess.
Would you rather become the go-to researcher for a major parasport organisation, or dedicate your time to mentoring the next generation of parasport researchers?
We are making this very tough.
Yeah.
The second one, purely, so this is going to go into what I see my research developing into. I'm really interested in primary bone cancer and acquired disabilities, and just the role of physical activity in those that have gone through that kind of treatment. So does an NGB, working with an NGB, drive that? No. I think helping the next generation to look at those kind of areas. Like, parasport is so physiology based and biomechanics based that we're just starting to get into the psychology and the sociology of it. You know, historically it's all been around physiology and biomechanics, which is cool, because it's helped to drive the progress in wheelchairs and stuff and make sports better and more fun to go and watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, helping to get researchers involved in the little niche areas.
I think there's so much to get involved with. Like,
Yeah.
there's still so much to uncover about it.
Oh, definitely.
It's such it's in its infancy, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things that we haven't even, the phrases, we haven't even touched. Dang, I can't remember the phrase.
Yeah, I think it's been really elite focused as well, which is what it's had to be, because
No, but you took a more grassroots.
Yeah.
I think
So
that's what
I
makes
think
your research quite unique.
Yeah.
Okay, would you rather study the role of AI in training para-athletes or focus on improving the design of sports prosthetics and wheelchairs?
Second one, definitely. I do not understand AI. I'm too old for that.
Fair enough.
It freaks me out.
Fair
It is a
enough.
bit scary.
It
the
is
thought of
scary,
it. I'm
yeah.
like, oh.
I grew up with watching The Terminator. I don't want that to happen.
Fair enough. Jess, you want to do one more?
Would you rather have the power to implement one universal parasport policy or fund 10 small-scale but impactful parasport initiatives?
Fun 10 small-scale initiatives,
Small
yeah.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Adam, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And
I hope I
sharing.
haven't rambled too much.
No. I've honestly, I've heard a bit about your research before, but hearing more about it, I think I always find it quite interesting just hearing about what people have been doing. And I don't know, every time you tell me about it, something changes with the story. Like, in a good... No, I don't mean it like that. I mean, like...
I'll make it up as I go along.
No, I don't mean it like that. I mean, like, you just learn something new. So
thank you.
I really enjoy hearing
No,
about your
it's
research.
really interesting.
And thank you, Jess, so much for
That's
coming and co-host.
okay.
And thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.